In 1966, England won the World Cup, and also Star Trek started on our TV screens. It lasted for 3 seasons before, unfortunately, it got cancelled. But those 3 seasons left a huge mark on fans' lives, so much so that they started petitions, writing letters to get the programme back. And in 1979, it came back on the big screen with Star Trek the Motion Picture. Now, since then, it's just grown so massively. We've had countless spin-off shows, countless movies, books, comics, and also online games as well, and there's just so much. So what we're going to do today is we are going to rank the entire franchise from worst to best. Right, before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, also like the video, and also share with your friends as well, and yeah, just get the words out there as well. Also, this list is my own personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. Most people normally do with my worst to best list. Just put your opinions in the comments below and I'll respond to every single one of them. Also, I'm only actually concentrating on the on-screen versions of it, so the movies and the TV series. So games, books, comics, all that lot is actually excluded. But seriously, go and check out Star Trek Phase 2 on YouTube. That's actually quite an impressive fan production. And lastly, this is a requested video. It was actually requested by Shauna for her boyfriend Dave, who just asked me to do a Star Trek video, and this is the one I've come up with, so I hope you enjoy. But other than that, let's get on with the list. Number 21, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Yeah, they got the title of this film so wrong. It actually should be called Star Trek V, Let's Rub William Shatner's Ego, because predominantly that's what this film is. It's just rubbing his ego. And other than that, it's just so wrong. The story was just boring and pointless. The main villain being an alien pretending to be God? No. And also just so many silly, stupid little mistakes, like Scotty, the best engineer in Starfleet, walking into a bulkhead. And let's not forget the whole turbo lift scene shooting up on rocket boots. Decks go from top to bottom. Deck 1 is the bridge at the top of the ship, not right at the very bottom of the ship. And also, they would have had to do that a lot as well to do that. It was just so wrong on so many levels. That being said, there was one little bit of good thing about this film, and that was the campfire scene. Just the trinity of cast just sitting around talking was just fantastic. In fact, if they made a 90-minute film of just those three just talking around a campfire, you would have got a lot better film than what we actually got. Number 20, Star Trek Insurrection. What was wrong with this film? More what was right with this film, because there wasn't that much right with this film. It was just devoid of passion, the story was just boring, and having Starfleet as the main villain was just the wrong timing. I know they've done that since then, but they laid the groundwork in Deep Space Nine, but when this film came out, they were still testing the waters of that, and it didn't quite tally over in this film very well. So yeah, that wasn't good. There was just juvenile humour all the way through this film, and trying to make Picard into a die-hard type character is just so out of character. And yeah, I didn't like this film. It was just too long, too boring, and also the reason why Worf was there was just pants. Oh, he's just here. Didn't work. He didn't actually need to be in this film. His character was going through some good character arcs over in Deep Space Nine. There was no decent reason for him to be there. So just so many things wrong with it. So let's just move on to the next one on this list. Number 19, Star Trek, the motion picture. So like I said in the intro to this video, Star Trek returns to the big screen with Star Trek, the motion picture back in 1979. And what did we get? Did we get some decent returning villains like the Romulans or the Klingons? No, we got a cloud. In fact, it got worse, because towards the end of that, it turned out to be an Earth-made probe that returned. The film just was wrong on so many levels, and also the characterizations. There wasn't any. It was just so wooden from all the main cast who lived and breathed these characters for 3 years back in the 60s. And I think the general consensus is that this film is actually called Star Trek, the motionless picture, and it's quite right as well. That being said, the special effects were fantastic, and they actually even hold up to this day as well. And it also introduced the refit Enterprise, which is my personal favourite ship. I mean, look, this is how much I love that ship. It is the backdrop to my phone. That's how much I love that ship. But they're the only good things. The story, nothing. Characters, nothing. just failed. Number 18, Star Trek Voyager. Now this is the part of the video where my audience retention drops off because everyone's going to switch off. I've already made my feelings clear that I didn't like Voyager. I've done a 10 things to make Voyager better video, and I'll put a link up here for you to click on to watch it. But yeah, I didn't like Voyager. It was too long-winded. There was just too many inconsistencies, and let's just not go on to the whole torpedo thing either. It was just a complete mess. And as I said, I've made my feelings clear. I didn't enjoy Voyager. I was actually glad when it ended, and it didn't end on a bang like it should have done. It ended on a whimper. Number 17, Star Trek Generations. This film is a passing of the torch film, and it actually not only brought the original series to the next generation, it also brought in parts of Deep Space Nine as well, like the uniforms. But other than that, it wasn't actually that good. It was quite boring. The way they brought Kirk back wasn't actually that good, and how Kirk died falling off a bridge was not that good either. Kirk should have gone out bang on a blaze of glory. Hell, have Picard fighting Sauron on the planet and have Kirk in charge of the Enterprise and saving the crew, and Enterprise going bang with Kirk in it. That would have been brilliant. But no, it wasn't. They just failed on so many fronts with this film. However, that being said, there was one redeeming feature this film had, which was quite cool, and it's a flashback to, or callback even, to Star Trek V, where Kirk said he would die alone without his friends, and that's what they did. He was alone without his friends, only Picard, who wasn't actually his friend. Number 16, Star Trek Beyond. So while I am glad that this film was not set on or near Earth, it's still not that good of a film. It's quite boring really, and the villain, he's a disgruntled Starfleet officer who found some alien tech and wants to destroy Starfleet. That's the premise of this film, and yeah, it doesn't really stand up that well. Also, how the Enterprise gets destroyed is probably the worst way the Enterprise got destroyed, and the 3 times it's been destroyed on the big screen, it wasn't actually that good. I didn't enjoy that at all. And also, the star bases are more futuristic than anything we've ever seen in Star Trek before. Also, having Beastie Boys destroying an alien fleet. Now, Sabotage is actually a good song, but how they used it wasn't that good. Number 15, Star Trek, the animated series. Cheap and repetitive animation, dodgy music. Take all that away, and you've actually got a very good series of Star Trek. In fact, this was actually more the 4th season of the original series. It had the original writers coming back, and they put their flair and they understood what Star Trek was about. Majority of the original cast came back to voice their characters, with the exception of one person, but all that was thanks to Leonard Nimoy as well. The one person that couldn't come back, which was Walter Keown, he couldn't come back, but he still came back and wrote a story for it as well, so he still had his input. Yeah, it was really good for its time. Why have I ranked it so low? It's because it didn't really stand the test of time. If you look at it today, you think, oh my god, what is it? I mean, I don't think the animation was that good for its time either, but take that away, it's not bad really. Number 14, Star Trek, the original series. So this is the one that started it all. It was groundbreaking and it was controversial both at the same time. It pushed humanity both on and off screen. A lot of what we see and do today is thanks to Star Trek. It was brilliant. I mean, the writing at times, it did have some ups, it had some downs, but overall it was definitely a win. It was impressive. The problem with this series is, same again, it hasn't actually stood the test of time very well, especially with some of the space special effects. Now I know they've done the reimagined series of it where they've actually redid the special effects quite a lot, but still it doesn't look right by today's standards, but the storytelling was fantastic. Number 13, Star Trek Into Darkness. Now this film is action-packed from the beginning right to the very end of this film, and overall it's not that bad of a film, except it fails on what it's trying to be. It's trying to be an homage to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. and it's not. It's actually being more of a parody of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and which I didn't like at all. I know a lot of people said no, it's not, and they saw it, but I didn't, especially as you'll see why later in this list. But I didn't really like the whole comparison to Star Trek 2. And also, a thing that really annoys me about this film is all the restrictions that you had in the entire Star Trek universe are gone. For example, transporting from Earth to Kronos, which is about 350 light years away. Shouldn't be possible. And also, curing death? That's a whole new level. No. Number 12, Star Trek Discovery. A very lackluster first series where you didn't really get to know any of the crew except for the main cast, and a story that was actually quite hard to follow. It was supposed to be about one thing, jumps to another thing, and then jumps back to the first thing. It was all over the place. That being said, the second series is where it jumps up a lot. I mean, the storytelling was a lot better in the second series. You got to know the crew a lot better, and you actually felt for the crew. It's full of friendship, which is supposed to be the core of Star Trek as well. Now, if they keep all these things going, for when we have the third series set in the 31st century, it should do really well, as long as they don't go back to how they did things in the first series. Number 11, Star Trek Nemesis. Now, ultimately, I do actually like Star Trek Nemesis. It's not actually that bad of a Star Trek film. It also is quite Trek in its core storytelling. Starfleet trying to make peace with Romulans. How more Trek can you get with that? It was actually really good, and especially as you had a very young Tom Hardy playing an even younger Picard. Granted, a more of a twisted, bitter Picard, but he did pull that off. And the space battle for the end of the film was fantastic. It was really good. No, it's not perfect, and I know there is a director's cut, which I've never actually seen, with more of Troy and Riker's wedding. And I am glad they did put Troy and Riker's wedding in the beginning of the film as well. Just finishes their character arcs off. However, one big flaw with this film: stop letting Troy drive the Enterprise. Number 10, Star Trek Enterprise. A common theme with near enough every Star Trek TV series is they're very slow burning. I mean, this series took a couple of series to actually take off. I mean, the first two series, they're okay, and there were some good stories, but it was just a little bit heartless going through, not much continuation. From the third series though, oh my god, it was like we got a completely different Star Trek series. That's when it took off. Unfortunately, its ratings were falling at that point, and it was past the point of no return. But it was actually really good, especially seeing humanity taking their first steps, talking to other races that we ended up being fans of from the original series. But all the way through, you saw little seeds of the Federation being planted just by the crew being humans and doing human things, trying to find peace between enemies as well. However, the series ended on a dud. Now, if you do take off the series finale, because let's face it, it's not really an Enterprise episode, it's more of a Next Generation episode. You take that off and you finish where it's supposed to have finished, you've got the seeds of the Federation being started, really. Number 9, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Now granted, there isn't actually that much in terms of story in this film, but that being said, it's still actually surprisingly a good film. It's also a film that only a couple managed to pull this off, where the entire crew have their chance to shine. They all have their little piece. It's not about the core trinity of Star Trek. Everyone has their chance to shine. And also going off to the Genesis planet, watching the Enterprise just being destroyed was heartbreaking. I was a kid when I first saw this film, and I was in tears because the Enterprise got destroyed. Oh yeah, and Kirk's son died as well in this film. Also, having Doc Brown as the villain, awesome. I mean, it's a good film. It's supposed to be an odd number film, and I know reviewers don't like odd number Star Trek films. It got poor reviews, but I liked it. It's not as bad as those reviewers say. Number 8, Star Trek. So J.J. Abrams brings his vision of Star Trek, bringing in a younger crew and a younger cast of actors. And surprisingly, he pulls it off. You do get a very exciting film, and also it still sort of carries on from the original timeline as well. But also you've also got a villain that you understand his motives. You may not agree with him and think, no, you're wrong, mate, but you understand why he's doing it. And also watching Kirk find his feet from such a young age is also a delight to watch as well. Number 7, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Right, before I get started, I'm putting it out there. I preferred Babylon 5. There, I've said it, I've had my punishment now. But that being said, it doesn't stop this being a bad Star Trek series. In fact, it was a really good Star Trek series, but it was also a very different Trek from what we were used to. It was set in a centralised place on a space station. It was also a lot more darker, a lot more militaristic, and it also had a very different captain to what we were used to. But it still had Trek at its core, trying to find the peace in war. And the one thing I did love about this series is even the supporting characters, not the main cast, the supporting characters, also had their stories. That you saw character developments from them as well. It was also one of these series could have carried on once the main story had finished. You could have had a new crew there and actually carried on. I know they did that with the books, which are very successful, but you could have actually still to this day carried on. Number 6, Star Trek Picard. Although it did take about 4 episodes to really get going, you have got a very good series of Star Trek in Star Trek Picard. It also carries on and keeps the characterization of Picard, where he's more a diplomat than a soldier, always tries to find a peaceful way out of any situation, and that's him. He's also an explorer in this, and you see that interest and discovery all the way through it, and it is quite impressive. Amazon Prime also took a risk with this as well, especially in a day and age where binge watching is the way to go. You do a TV series, you upload them all at the same time, that's it. They didn't. They actually did week by week by week, which is a risky gamble in this day and age, but luckily the stories kept you wanting to come back after week, and that's what we need. It makes good TV. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I was pretty much in close to tears in the last 10 minutes of the last episode. I'm not going to tell you why, because there are no spoilers in this, but if you haven't watched Picard, go and watch it. It's on Amazon Prime. Number 5, Star Trek First Contact. This is where the Next Generation finally get their own feature film. Generations was a passing of the torch film. This is their first film that they had solo outing on, and boy did they come in with a bang. Better ship, better uniforms, everything just looked so much more better compared to Generations. And what bad guy did they bring back for this film? It had to be the Borg. There was no one else that could have been bad guy for this film. And it was just brilliant. It also showed Picard going through the torment of his time from being a Borg back in the 3rd and 4th series of Star Trek The Next Generation. My only criticism of this film, and it is a very small nitpick of this film, is when the Defiant comes in, which don't forget Defiant was supposed to be in Deep Space Nine. They had a nobody piloting. You should have had O'Brien piloting, because he was from the Next Generation crew. He could have slotted in and he could have been in this film as well. But as I said, that's just nitpicking really. Number 4, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. So the film that doesn't fire a single phaser or photon torpedo from any ship. Yep, I'm being serious, go and watch it. There's not a single ship weapon fired, and yet Earth is under attack. Sort of. It was a misunderstanding. And that's the beauty of this film. It wasn't an evil entity, it was a misunderstanding. A probe trying to find humpback whales. And the only place they can get these humpback whales was from Earth 1986. And that's what they did. They went back in time, and you get to see what San Francisco looked like in 1986. Now, looking at this film like 30 years later, it's so cool to watch, see how different things are in San Francisco compared to what they look like today. It was also the second film that all the cast have their little moment to shine. It wasn't around about one or two or the trinity of characters. The entire crew had their moment to shine. It was surprisingly a really good film with no space battles whatsoever. Number 3, Star Trek The Next Generation. Star Trek does have the usual flaw that it takes a while to get going, and this one took about 2 series before The Next Generation found its feet. In fact, the second series, The Next Generation, is ultimately its worst series out of the whole lot. But from the third series onwards, it found its feet. You found yourself caring about each and every character. You wanted to know what was going to happen to them in not just only their professional lives, their personal lives as well. But the other thing that this series did that no other TV series, and I mean that, most TV series, is cliffhangers. Because at that point, cliffhangers were ultimately reserved for soap operas, and that was it. And that all changed with the third series ending, The Best of Both Worlds. It reintroduced cliffhangers. Now everyone's doing it, but it all started here with The Next Generation. But the best thing about Next Generations is some of its best episodes are ones that are not really sci-fi. The Inner Light, Picard in his memories lives another life on a planet with hardly any technology. And it's a brilliant episode, well directed, well acted. And that shows you the strength of what they had here with The Next Generation. It was also a series they probably could have carried on, but it would have actually diminished in quality over time. But yeah, out of all the TV series, The Next Generation is the best, but on this list there's only 2 films that are better. Number 2, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. So the premise of Star Trek VI actually came out about things that were happening in real life. I mean, in 1990, the Berlin Wall came down, which ended the Cold War between Russia and the USA. So that's where the writers went with that. What would happen if that war came down between Klingons and the Federation? And the result is what we got in Star Trek VI, that both sides want peace, yet both sides don't want the peace. There's too much hostility, there's too much anger, and it's a very real world thing. That's Trek to its core as well, showing real world problems but in the futuristic settings are a peaceful way of sorting things out, and that's what we've got. And especially having a final fight sequence between the 2 biggest opposing people to peace, and Kirk being one of them, ultimately being the figurehead of doing that peace, was just amazing. It was it's a good action-packed film with lots of heart, lots of Sherlock Holmes references, but ultimately an enjoyable film. Number 1, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So yeah, at number 1 I put Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And to be perfectly honest, before I even started doing anything on this list, I wrote it up, and this was always going to be at number 1. And the reason being is this is the film that not only got me into Star Trek, but sci-fi in general. Because before I watched Star Trek II, I had seen a couple of episodes of Star Trek and I wasn't interested. And I had seen Star Trek the motion picture, wasn't interested. But this is the film that actually got me into sci-fi. And the best thing is, it was actually designed and budgeted and produced like it was a TV movie or direct-to-DVD like we have nowadays. But that's how little they thought of it until they saw what they had on their hands and they realised they had to put this on the big screen. And I'm glad they did, because this is the film that revitalised the entire Star Trek franchise. Without this being as good as it was, you wouldn't have had Next Generation, you wouldn't have had Deep Space Nine, you wouldn't have had Star Trek Online. None of that would be here if it wasn't for this film. Especially if you had a director who had never seen Star Trek before in his life. And a villain they just plucked from a random TV episode because it was one that they could carry on from a TV episode from the original series. It was brilliant, it was personal, and also they stripped away a lot of these technologies and made it more of a naval fight rather than a space fight. It was just fantastic. This film is pretty much flawless. But as I have a saying that no film is a perfect film, I'm pretty sure I could do a 10 things to make Star Trek 2 better. But I'm not going to, because I don't want to ruin this film for me. So there you have it. That's my list. What do you think? Have I been too harsh on some, or have I been too nice to others? Do you have your own personal list? If you do, please put them in the comments down below. I would love to actually read your comments. I do reply back to every single comment as well. Is there anything you would like me to rank from worst to best? And do you have any films you want me to review? Let me know. Get in contact with me. I'm on these various social media sites. So yeah, just get in touch with me. I'll have a chat with anyone, me. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your time. Check out one of these other videos here. And also please subscribe to my channel. I upload every Sunday at 6 PM UK time. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye bye.